energizes right brain, as Guruji always tells us. That is parasympathetic part. Now the sympathetic part, which is Pingala Nadi, right side nostril, energizes left brain. That is masculine part, and Ida is feminine part. Ida is related to emotions like love, devotion, which is feminine character. Masculine part, which is more related to logical brain, that is sympathetic.
Can you explain again the second one?
Sorry, which one?
The somatic and autonomic.
Yeah, the autonomic part is mainly the part which is not in our voluntary control. So when we plan to do some action, for example, I want to touch this, the signal will start in the brain that this is what I want to do. The nerve will carry the signal to the muscles of the arm. I'll do there, I'll touch it, and that part is somatic part. It's not autonomic. Autonomic is mainly related to our internal functions, mainly, like digestion, like respiration, like kidney functions. They all are mainly influenced by the autonomic nervous system.
Somatic?
Somatic is the voluntary that we want to get, just like sciatic nerve. We all know about sciatic nerve. It mainly carries the somatic sensation. So if we have problem in the sciatic nerve, that is kind of a somatic part of our body. So we have discussed about this diagram. The next one is the sympathetic and parasympathetic. So the left side, which is parasympathetic, right side, which is sympathetic. So all the red lines are sympathetic nervous system. So what happens, that sympathetic control is mainly through the ganglions which are up along our spine. Right from bottom to the top, we have got a chain of small centers. This is sympathetic part. And we have got few centers in the brain and few centers right at the bottom which control the parasympathetic part. So that's how this autonomic nervous system is controlled, Ida and Pingala. The main functions are listed here. Basically, parasympathetic is to relax, to calm down, and it controls everything that comes in this, like digestion, respiration, it helps in all that. Sympathetic is mainly fight and flight. We all know fight and flight. Whenever we are in that situation, our sympathetic system goes up and it starts constricting our pupil. It dilates our bronchi so that we can have bigger, more oxygen, more respiration. It speeds up our heartbeat, secretes adrenaline, more and more adrenaline, so that we are ready for fight and flight. That's the function of the sympathetic nervous system. And on the other hand, parasympathetic, when it gets activated, this slows down the heartbeat, increases the secretion in the digestive system, increases the motility in the intestine. It tries to empty the bowel and empty the bladder. So it's basically more of relaxation part. I'll hand over to her now.
Good morning, everybody. I'll continue with the digestive system. This is the system which we all have set into action after a breakfast. So we'll go straight into it. Now, as we can see, the digestive system starts from the mouth, oral cavity. Then there is a throat here, which is called the pharynx. This is the food pipe, which we call esophagus. It goes in the stomach, which is a J-shaped structure. And the amount of food we eat is too much, but the stomach is actually very small. It's like a fist of a hand, but it is very elastic, so it can accommodate a lot of food. And that is why we don't know how much to eat, because it can just keep on increasing. So then there is a small intestine here, which is all coiled up. And this is the large intestine, which is in the periphery. This is the rectum, and this is the anal orifice through which we pass out our feces. Along with this, there are some other organs like liver, which is very important for digestion, and other functions as well. And there is gallbladder here, pancreas, which we all know in relation to diabetes, and salivary glands in mouth. They all constitute the digestive system. So as I have mentioned, all these are the parts of the digestive system. Now, digestive system is an involuntary process. Unfortunately, eating is a voluntary process, but digestive system is an involuntary. It's not controlled by us, but it is an automatic reflex which starts with the autonomic nervous system. As soon as we start eating, the body gets up into a series of action which starts with the mouth, and it starts in digesting the food. We all have noticed even before we eat, sometimes the smell of the food, the sight, and even the mere thought of the food can increase the salivation. So that is the power of the autonomic nervous system. The food is still not there in the mouth, but the body is ready now to digest the food. And we all know that when the saliva comes in our mouth. Now it's controlled by autonomic nervous system, as Jitin said. The parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous systems are there, and they control the movement of the stomach, the intestine, and the large intestine. Now, hunger and satiety center are in the hypothalamus, which is just to say that this is a part in the brain which is controlling when and where, how much we get hungry, and when we are full, it signals to that center so that we don't want to eat anymore. Hypothalamus also, if you remember yesterday, we said that it is connected to a lot of emotions, and that we'll discuss later on in the slide how these two are interrelated then. Now, yogic aspect of digestive system which is important. The first is the chewing. We all know that we should chew our food slowly. That is being passed on from our parents that eat slowly. But it is very hard to see nowadays that anybody is taking time to eat the food slowly. We all are in the go, run, taking a sandwich or something, smoothie in a car or something or the other, where the main attention is not on food. We are just eating it and doing something else. Very commonly, breakfast is there and something on the computer or phone is there or a newspaper. So the act of eating, first of all, is not being registered. Before we start on to eat, as Guruji has mentioned many times, we should have a gratitude and a thankful heart, and then we should take in the food. And it should be done with a proper chewing. Chewing should be so much so that it should actually make the solid food liquid in our mouth. We say that when you are eating the food, you should be able to drink your food. It should be that much liquid in the mouth. And chew your water. Chew your water means that we should take sip by sip of water, not be in a hurry to gulp it all down, take time to drink, and drink only as much as we need. So while drinking water, we all are generally standing up and just gulping the water glass. So first of all, we should be sitting down properly, taking sip by sip, and only drink as much as we need. It's not like we should, as the fads are, that think this much liter, drink as much as your body needs. And chew your food properly. Sometimes they say that we should chew our food 32 times. It's not possible to count all the chews, but make it liquid enough so that when it goes, it is in a liquid state. Then the digestion in the stomach. Stomach plays a vital role because it is a very muscular organ and it has to churn the food as the blenders do in our modern day technology. So it is churning the food which it is getting from the mouth. Digestion of a liquid takes anywhere between half to 1 hour. A small meal or a snack, not a small meal, sorry, a snack or a fruit will take about 1 to 2 hours to digest in the stomach, and a large meal about 3 to 4 hours in the stomach. So now we have to be mindful of these time gaps when we are doing yoga, because it should be done in an empty stomach. So either done in the morning or roughly after 4 hours after a heavy meal, preferably 4 to 6 hours gap, but can do after 4 hours. And if we have taken a light snack, a fruit, then should ideally be giving a gap of 2 hours. Now, I don't know if I'm right or wrong here, but I think our sciences, our Shastras say that there should be a gap of 2 prahars between the meals, which is roughly 6 hours. So we should aim for keeping a gap of 6 to 8 hours between our main meals. And if we go by that, it becomes difficult in today's world to balance the meals. So it is up to everybody, but try to keep a gap of at least 4 to 6 hours between your main heavy meals. And always take time to eat the food and chew the food.
And your lunch is cancelled.
Lunch is cancelled. So here is the concept of the meal gap, which I mentioned. Also, I would like to add on here is, we have because we are not actually ignorant, not that we are not careful about our health, but we don't know that what we are eating, how it impacts. So when we have taken a heavy meal, and say after 1 hour, we are preparing a meal for the kids, and just feel like eating, oh, I'll take another spoon of theirs and eat. Or there is just a snack in the office and you end up taking a biscuit after lunch, say after 1 hour. What that does is that the stomach has already started the digestive process, and now you are again putting something in that raw state, and the stomach has to work again now. To understand this better, when we are cooking in the kitchen and you have put all the raw ingredients and you have started the cooking, after 20 minutes if you think, oh, I need to put more lentil or more of the other thing, it won't get cooked the same way now. Half of the food has already been cooked. So if you are adding some raw ingredient now, the end result is not going to be great, because the raw ingredient will not get cooked, or if you wait for it to be cooked, the other things will be spoiled. The same is when we are eating the main meals. After you've had something, tell your brain that no more food for 4 hours, no more snacking, no more of anything, because technically the body has got what it wants. Now it is basically our desire of eating, and that what we should control. The other is emotions and digestion. As I mentioned, the hypothalamus is the center for emotions, and hypothalamus also the center in digestion for many things. So if we are eating with a peaceful mind, with gratitude, thankfulness in heart, and actually being aware of whatever we are eating, taking time to eat, chewing it properly, there are so many aspects in it. And then we eat the food, it gets digested proper, assimilated properly, and more than the nutritive value, the pranic value of the food goes in the body and helps us. On the other hand, if we are stressed out, in a hurry, angry, shouting at kids or partner or whatever, and then just stuffing in the food, it doesn't get digested properly. It may give a nutritive value, but the pranic value of the food then deteriorates, and we don't get the final benefit of our food. Now, most asanas affect our digestive system. This we all know because everything moves around the abdomen. So whatever we are doing, forward bending, backward bending, turning, twisting the spine, something or the other, the intestines, like Mandukasana which we did in the morning, it is just energizing the whole of the abdomen. So digestive system, it's very rare. I think it's very difficult to find any asana which is not affecting a part of digestive system. So all the asanas, if done properly, will be helping us to manage our digestive system properly. Now dhoti is mainly for esophagus and stomach. Dhoti, as Guruji has explained before, it's the retching. We drink water and we take out that vomiting which washes the acid of the stomach. And Noli basti. Basti is the kind of enema which empties the large intestine of the feces and cleans it. After that, I come to the circulatory system. I hope everything is clear in the digestive system. Yeah.
Many people now talk about intermittent fasting. So, is that of any use? What's your opinion about it?
Intermittent fasting is a long topic, and I don't know whether Guruji wants to take it later on. But as of what I have studied and what I know about it, in our Indian culture, as it is, you're eating dinner before sunset. So somewhere at around 6. And they say when you get up in the morning, you should be having a gap of 2 to 3 hours after waking up. So it gives a time difference of 12 to 14 hours for your breakfast, which is good enough for intermittent fasting. Nowadays, the fad is for 16, 18 hours, which as far as my knowledge goes is not quite right. But if you want, I think Guruji would be the better person to ask regarding that.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
When you overeat, sometimes you feel kind of a funny feeling as though you start sweating too much and some kind of a lightheadedness. Why that happens?
See, when we are overeating, first of all, whenever we are eating, you know that all the blood circulation has started to go now in the stomach. So all the other organs are compromised. Lightheadedness can be explained by that as well, because the blood is now, it needs to work hard, especially on overeating, because we have eaten to the full of our capacity. And sweating, all this is controlled by the autonomic nervous system. So now when there is a disbalance, many things starts to happen accordingly. So that is why the whole system, the cycle is stimulated now for digestion, but it has its side effects, which are others as well. And that is why you get sweating. And sometimes even like so many other features, heartburn, and you start feeling scared because it mimics like the heart pain as well. So all the nerves are stimulating the heart as well as the stomach. So they give the same type of clinical features.
The first kind of parasympathetic.
Yeah.
So what's the optimal time to eat a main meal? Like, because the digestive process will start after a certain time. So what's the optimal time?
To finish the main meal, as in what is the time you have to spend in eating a meal, you're asking? I think somewhere between 20 to 30 minutes, if I'm not wrong. Because the thing is, if we are chewing the food slowly, we will fill ourselves early as well. We don't need that much amount. I think we all can experiment that whatever food we are eating on a day-to-day basis, you cut down that portion to half, chew your food 30 times consciously, and see whether you actually need the other half or not. And I think many of us will agree we may not need it, because when we are chewing the food slowly, we don't need that much bulky amount, because the body is already getting satiety full, and that need of the body gets full even by the half amount. So we may finish the food in 20 minutes, and you will be surprised that the other half of the portion you will not need it. We may want to eat it, that is different, but we don't need it. So I think you can experiment that and see, and let us all know how it goes.
So I have been known to eat fast, right? And what takes my wife 10 minutes, I eat it in 3 or 4 minutes. So what happens most of the times is I eat fast, and after like 10-15 minutes I start feeling full. While I'm eating, I don't feel that, but only after 10-15 minutes I feel that I have overeaten. So I think that explains.
Yeah, then you should eat slowly, because if you are eating fast and you are eating 15 minutes, then probably you are eating
Yes.
more than what is needed.
Yeah.
And you are feeling full when the stomach is actually full. Technically, we should just fill our stomach 1/3 with,
Yes.
with the food, 1/3 with the liquid, and 1/3 should be kept empty for the gases.
Yeah.
So if you start eating slowly, I think if you're taking 15 minutes, reduce it to 7 minutes and then eat slowly. Because eating fast nowhere is not even a good habit, because it
Absolutely.
won't give the best of the benefit of the food as well.
Yeah.
I'll proceed to the circulatory. Sorry, did you?
Yeah, I just had a question. Kids, what is the optimal interval between meals or snacks?
For kids as well, see, the thing nowadays is that with children it is very difficult. Now which age group you are talking about, because if they are out and about and physically active, they do need 3 meals a day. But better, because the kids digest their foods fast as well, and whatever they are eating, that energy is consumed. Unlike us, we are sedentary compared to our kids. So 4 to 6 hours is an optimal gap for main meals. And for them, if we are giving them something to snack on between, we have to make sure that it is a food content with high pranic value. So that even if they are eating small in amount, it will yield more benefit. I hope. Let's go to the circulatory system now. Now, circulatory system consists of heart, blood vessels, and the blood which is there. Now, this diagram is elaborate, but I'll tell very briefly what's happening. Heart is here. Heart has 4 chambers, left part and right part of the heart. Now, this is the atria, which is the top, and these are the ventricles, which we all know pump the blood. The heart is pumping the blood in the whole body. The fresh blood, seen as red color, it goes in the body to all the parts and all the cells. From the cells, it is collecting all the waste material in forms of even carbon dioxide or digested material which is not needed, which goes in the heart again, the right side. From here, it goes in the lungs, where it is purified, and then again the fresh blood is going to the left heart to be pumped out again into the body. I hope this loop is clear, although it is not that important to remember, but it just forms the basis of how the circulatory system works. Now, the circulatory system comprising of the heart with its chambers, blood vessels which are arteries and veins. Arteries are carrying the pure blood, veins are carrying the impure blood, which we call oxygenated and deoxygenated. And blood itself is a very important vehicle for everything. We may eat whatever, do whatever, but everything is carried out by the blood. All the gases, all the nutrients, all the waste matter. So it's like an efficient transporting mechanism which never gets tired. So that is the importance of blood. Now, blood pressure and heart rate. The heart center is in the medulla oblongata, which is a part of the brain. This is the effect of autonomic nervous system and effect of hypothalamus and emotions. We have pretty much dealt with this, and in the next slide also I'll again deal with it. But it is just to show that how parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous systems are working in digestion and how our mood and emotions are affecting the digestive state. The other important object is carotid sinus in circulatory system. It is a small pea-sized organ, I'll say small, which is here in the neck, and it is very, very sensitive to stretch. So whenever we are doing asanas which are involving stretching of the neck, this one gets stimulated and it sends then signals to the brain, and that manages through parasympathetic and sympathetic our tone, our blood pressure, our balance, and many more things. That is why in all the asanas which are involving neck movements, we should be gentle going in and gentle coming out, so that the body gets the time to acclimatize itself and maintain and give you a steady posture. The yogic aspect of circulatory system. Many asanas like Shirshasana, Sarvangasana, Vipreet Karni, and few pranayams like Bhastrika, Ujjayi affect blood circulation and blood pressure. We all know that Shirshasana, where we are inverting our body, and the pranayam like Bhastrika, where we are forcefully expelling. So all these are incurring load on heart. Now, Guruji always demonstrates, and he corrects us as well, which is, we are very fortunate, because these things, if they are not done correctly, they can actually increase the blood pressure and cause more damage. People think that they are doing pranayam just by watching on TV. There is nobody to guide them. And many times, because of faulty techniques, they have the notion that I am doing Kapalabhati and Bhastrika, I am managing my blood pressure. But when they go to the doctors, they find the contrary result, because it has not been done properly. Workload on cardiac function during Vajrasana and Padmasana is less than during sitting on a chair. This is a very interesting fact, that a chair, when we are sitting, it's a very relaxed posture. Studies have found out that when we are sitting in a Vajrasana or Padmasana, the load which the heart gets is further reduced. Heart is under very minimal load, and it's in a state of relaxation. So the body is actually very much synchronized to do many more functions easily and peacefully. We are not interfering with the normal rhythm of the body if we sit in these postures. Mind and body relaxation leading to reduced muscle tone, lower heart rate, and reduced blood pressure. As in Shavasana, we have all experienced when we are lying down and we ease out all the thoughts and emotions, giving our body that time and opportunity where it just goes into natural balance. We don't have to force the body to relax. So that is when the mind and body have relaxed, the circulatory system, it just pacifies. Heart doesn't have to pump that much, and the blood easily goes through all the cells in the body. The last, I'd just like to tell that whenever we are angry, upset, and stressful, we think that it is just harming that particular time. Say 5 minutes I've got angry or upset, frustrated, whatever that emotion, and I think after 5 minutes it's all over, let me continue. But the body still keeps on dealing with those hormones, the autonomic nervous system which has got kicked in now because of our anger. And that is why there is an entity which is called like stress ulcers, which form in the stomach. We may be peaceful after 5 minutes, but the autonomic nervous system cycle has started, and now it causes small ulcers in the stomach, which people get surprised that, okay, I have this, but I was not that stressed in my life. It has nothing to do with that. Small bouts of anger cause obstruction in heart, which is so common nowadays. Everybody has some or the other degree of obstruction in heart, and they get angioplasties done and stuff like that. So it is that small steps will lead to better results. Just like if you're not careful in small steps, it leads to massive disasters. That way, small steps will lead to better results. I'll just give to Jitendra for the next slide.
So the next one is respiratory system. Again, this slide, big slide with different parts. We all know the respiratory system starts from the nose. Then we have got the part which is pharynx, which is a part of the digestive system as well as the respiratory system. So pharynx has got two parts we call oropharynx and nasopharynx, which is basically a part of digestive or the part of respiratory system. Then we have trachea, which is the main windpipe, which divides into two. One goes to right side, one goes to left side. And as we can see, the right side has got 3 lobes in the lungs and the left side has got 2. The small lines, they are the very small windpipes, we call them bronchioles, and the further unit is very small balloon-like structure. I'm not sure many of us in India, we have seen that balloon, we blow and we leave and the balloon just starts deflating and the noise comes. That type of balloon thing is we call alveoli, which is the basic unit of the lung. That's where the main gas exchange happens. CO2 goes out and oxygen goes in. And diaphragm and respiratory muscles, they also are the part of the respiratory system. So we've discussed nose, larynx, trachea, smaller air pipes, alveoli, and diaphragm and respiratory muscles. Now again, as all other systems, and Ekta has mentioned, digestion is involuntary process. Similarly, respiratory system is involuntary process. It consists of 3 parts: inspiration, actual gas transfer, or expiration. So inspiration, taking in, gas transfer, when we are inspiring inside, the gas transfer happens, and then expiration. In the yogic language, it's Rechak, Urak, which is inspiration and expiration, and Kumbhak as well, which is holding the breath. As the heart center is medulla, respiratory center is medulla oblongata as well. It's a part behind the brain and it controls the respiration. Respiration is also under autonomic nervous system, and that's why I was stressing upon in the nervous system on the autonomic nervous system, parasympathetic and sympathetic. They control most of our internal body functions, and similarly they control respiratory system as well. Now the very interesting fact about respiratory system, it's in our partial voluntary control. All other systems, we can only very limited amount we can control. For example, if we feel that we have to go to the toilet, we can hold only little bit for some time only, but then that's the part in our voluntary control. Rest inside is not in our voluntary control. Respiration is partial voluntary control. We try to hold our breath and we can maintain it for some time. And that's how this is in partial voluntary control. The other part which is very important in respiration is that all other body functions, they are single way. Autonomic nervous system affecting the organ. It doesn't work other way around. While in respiratory system, it works other way around as well. So the autonomic nervous system controlling respiratory system, but when we control our respiratory system by our will, like pranayama, it can actually affect autonomic nervous system as well. That's the idea. And that's where our rishis and munis, they put too much of emphasis on pranayama. Because only by pranayama we can affect our nervous system in a way that we can't do with any other body system, except meditation and dhyana. That's different. It's the physical aspect I'm talking about. Physically, with the respiration only, we can control our autonomic nervous system. So what is pranayama? Prana, as Guruji always tell, it's a vital force. It's the life energy. It's not just breath. Breath is only a physical aspect of prana. And ayam means to control. So when we control the breath, it is pranayama. So full pranayama is controlling the vital force, controlling the life energy is pranayama. And as I said, emotions, thoughts, again, respiration is the system where we control the autonomic nervous system. Hypothalamus, we have seen yesterday and today as well, gets affected by emotions and thoughts. And that affects autonomic nervous system. And in respiration system case, it's vice versa as well. Like controlling the respiration, we control our emotions, thoughts, and we can control autonomic nervous system as well. Coming to the nasal cycle, I'm not sure if we all know about nasal cycle or not. Predominantly, we breathe through one nostril at a time. We don't breathe with the two nostrils together equally. Even if we breathe with two nostrils, it will be unequal. One will be dominant at one time and the other will be dominant at other times. And it is said that every 1 to 2 hours or so, it changes. So if I'm breathing predominantly from the right nostril at the moment, in 1 to 2 hours time, I'll be breathing from the left nostril, as long as I haven't got any cold or flu or something like that. This nasal cycle is important because in pranayama, when we do pranayama like Anulom Vilom and all that, that's where the alternate nostril breathing and everything gets in control. Asthma. We all know about asthma, and it's increasing with the pollution nowadays. And especially in countries like India, pollution is going up. People are coming more and more with asthma and allergy-like problems. What is asthma? Asthma is basically the reactivity in the lung goes high to different stimulus in the body. So our lungs react in a way that the windpipe, which I was showing, the smaller windpipes here, they get very, very narrow and they start secreting too much of phlegm, which is secretion, and it constricts the airway and we can't breathe properly. That's what asthma is.
Sorry, can you repeat that, please? About asthma, what actually is happening at anatomical level?
So what happens that these smaller pipes, they become very, very sensitive to different stimulus. It could be exercise, it could be dust, it could be pollen, or it could be some inherent inside stimulus. That stimulus causes secretion of phlegm or different mucus inside the lungs, and it constricts the smaller air passages. Because of the constriction and too much of secretion, air cannot go properly into the alveoli, which is the unit of the lung where the actual gas transfer happens. And because of that, it's like more and more wheezing. We all can hear the sounds, musical sounds, because the pipe is narrow. When the pipe is narrow, air is going through the narrow pipe like a flute, and it creates the sound. That sound is wheezing, and that's what happens in asthma. So what happens in asthma and yoga? There are two aspects of asthma control in yoga. One is physical aspect and other is psychological aspect. In asthma, when we don't get enough air, we feel anxious, we feel panicky, and that affects our emotions and thoughts, and again brain starts getting more and more anxious. That panic state creates more trouble in asthma, and we suffer more and more with asthma. So what happens is that when we do pranayama, or any other deep breathing exercise, our lungs get better oxygenation, all our muscles are active, and it improves the psychologically relaxation. It improves the feeling of relaxation. And that's when, even if somebody is getting asthma attack, because of the yoga and pranayama, their brain is relaxed, their brain is calm, and they don't create that feeling of anxiety anymore. And that's when it's more psychologically under control. It doesn't affect psychologically as much as it would do if we are not to do yoga or pranayama. That's how it affects physically as well as psychologically.
Is that why we call it psychosomatic?
Kind of. Not exactly in the literal meaning, but it is related to the psychosomatic.
So the neti pot we do with the water, so that will help asthma control, or?
It can, as I said, asthma comes with the